Welcome back to the White House. The FBI is releasing documents confirming that then FBI Director James Comey began drafting his public statement about the Hillary Clinton email investigation 2 months before it was complete. Joining me now with reaction is South Carolina Congressman Trey Gowdy. He's the chairman of the House Oversight Committee and a member of the House Intelligence and Judiciary Committees. He's in Greenville tonight. Congressman, thanks for being here.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I think I left out ethics. You're on every committee, I guess.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for being here. Listen to this soundbite from a hearing.
Did you make the decision not to recommend criminal charges relating to classified information before or after Hillary Clinton was interviewed by the FBI on July the 2nd?
After. If colleagues of ours believe I am lying about when I made this decision, please urge them to contact me privately so we can have a conversation about this. All I can do is tell you again, the decision was made after that because I didn't know what was going to happen in that interview.
Well, now the FBI has come out with these documents that suggest that that decision was made well before that time. Your thoughts on all of this?
Well, Brett, we're going to take him up on his offer. We are going to talk to his present and former colleagues. May the 2nd is when these memos, these heavily redacted memos, appear where they are discussing internally whether or not to make a charging decision. It is a month and a half later before he announces his decision in early July. So you got, that's 2 months. 2 months from May the 2nd until July the 5th. There were 24 witness interviews in that time period. So if you're discussing whether or not to charge someone in early May and you haven't interviewed 24 witnesses, including one named Clinton, John Ratcliffe asked exactly the right question. I'm just not sure that Director Comey gave him an accurate answer.
I interviewed then Attorney General Loretta Lynch. I asked her this about this investigation. Does it concern you, though, that there is this perception that that your Justice Department may, in the end, cut Secretary Clinton a break or do her a favor?
With every case, we handle it in the same way, and that's what I'd like to convey to the American people.
Now, Comey said that the tarmac meeting between Loretta Lynch and former President Bill Clinton was what precipitated his action of taking it essentially from DOJ. But that doesn't seem to add up.
No, the chronology does not add up. Again, May the 2nd is when they are discussing their charging decision. The meeting on the tarmac was June 26th, June 27th. So that's a month and a half later. And then a couple of days later, they interview Secretary Clinton. And then 2 days later, they decide that they're not going to charge. And he makes that public pronouncement. So his ostensible reason for taking that decision away from the Department of Justice was that meeting on the tarmac. But yet a month and a half earlier, he is memorializing a decision he's already made. So the chronology does not add up. His answers have been all over the map to both the Intelligence Committee and the clip you just played from Oversight. So we need to talk to him again, but we need to look at these memos before we have that conversation with him.
So you would like to see Comey back testifying on Capitol Hill?
For a number of reasons. He made a lot of decisions in 2016 that I think are worth reviewing. You know, Brett, whenever somebody decides to charge someone, there are lots of layers of scrutiny. When you decide not to charge someone, there aren't that many layers of scrutiny, but there ought to be at least a couple. The media should do it, but also Congress should look at this decision not to charge and whether or not it was made before you interviewed 24 witnesses, including the target of the investigation. Yeah, we need to talk to him again.
Loretta Lynch is up on the Hill Friday, we're told. Will she be asked any of this?
I don't think so. She's appearing before the House Intelligence Committee, and it will be limited to the scope of the Russia investigation, although you raise a good point. There are lots of reasons to talk to Loretta Lynch also, including to either corroborate or contradict Jim Comey's recollection that he talked to her about his decision to appropriate the Clinton server decision onto himself, but not on Friday. That will be restricted to what did Russia do and with whom did they do it.
There's a lot of investigations. Obviously, the Russia investigation, the Bob Mueller special counsel investigation. You are also looking and have talked to the former ambassador to the United Nations, Samantha Power. We reported that she requested, or her office requested, some 260-plus efforts to unmask. In other words, get who was talking and picked up in surveillance. How did she answer that question? Why so many?
Well, I'll tell you broadly, Brett, I think if she were on your show, she would say those requests to unmask may have been attributed to her, but they greatly exceed by an exponential factor the request she actually made. So that's her testimony, and she was pretty emphatic in it. The surveillance community, the intelligence community has assigned this number of requests to her. Her perspective, her testimony is they may be under my name, but I did not make those requests. So we've got to get to the bottom of that. If there is someone else making requests on behalf of a principal in the intelligence community, we need to know that because we're getting ready to reauthorize a program that's really important to the country, but also has a masking component to it.
Two more quick questions, and that is, any word back from the White House on your request for information about the use of private emails here?
Yes, sir. On the issue of private email and private travel, we have 3 categories: fully complied, partially complied, and ain't really done a good job yet. The third category, we have written those agencies back and said, okay, you didn't respond the first time. This is number 2, and if you don't do it number 2, the word's going to start with an S and rhyme with subpoena.
Lastly, there are Democrats, and social media is picking it up, that this White House, this president, hasn't really talked about what happened in Niger with these 4 special forces soldiers who were killed. People bringing up your name for the investigation into Benghazi. Your thoughts on that and why we don't know anything?
Well, with respect to Benghazi, we looked at what happened in Libya, 2 years after it happened, and after 4 or 5 other congressional committees had tried to look into it, but without much success. So we're not 2 years down the road in terms of what happened in Niger. I want to know what happened anytime any American citizen, particularly a soldier, loses his or her life on the battlefield. That would be Armed Services Committee. It might be the House Intelligence Committee. We're nowhere near needing a select committee, which is what I was on. But it also hasn't been 2 years, and we didn't have a false video narrative, and no one was emailing their daughter with a different explanation than the one that they were giving the public. So I get that my Democrat friends are obsessed with Benghazi. The report's been out for a while. I would encourage them to read it. It's a little early to start drawing that analogy.
Just bring it up because it came up on a couple of interviews I just listened to before I came on. Mr. Chairman, we appreciate your time. We'll follow up on all of these issues coming up. Thanks a lot.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And that's true unless they are sold to, possessed by, or acquired by a prohibited person, which would include a straw purchaser. So my question to you is this. Did ATF have contemporaneous or pre-knowledge of any straw purchasers purchasing weapons in Arizona?
Well, sir, straw purchasers are not prohibited individuals unless they've been convicted of some crime.
No, it is against the law to purchase a gun knowing you're going to transfer it to someone else, to therefore get around the fact that the person you're going to give it to is a prohibited person. Agreed?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, that's a straw purchaser. Someone who's going to give the gun to a prohibited person is a straw purchaser.
Yep.
So now that we've got that cleared up, did you know that anyone who was acquiring firearms from firearms dealers in Arizona were straw purchasers, contemporaneous with the acquisition? Did ATF know it?
We have to prove that, in fact, that it's a violation. Yes, sir. We presented to the U.S. Attorney's Office evidence that we believe that these individuals were, in fact, straw purchasers.
Well, let's do it another way. The very first weapon recovered in Mexico through a trace, did you go back to the purchaser of that weapon and interrogate him?
I did not know, sir.
Did anyone with ATF?
I'm not aware of that, no, sir.
Why not?
I don't know, sir.
You've got a gun that was purchased in Mexico, that purchased in the United States, that makes it into Mexico. You know through your trace that that's the gun. Did you go back to the person who purchased it? That's an old-fashioned investigative technique. It's not as complicated as letting guns walk. It is more effective, though, to actually go interrogate the person who made the acquisition. Did you do that?
Well, sir, as I stated earlier, in this investigation, realizing that if you take off one straw purchaser, you're not making an impact on the greater organization.
Right. I want to ask you about the greater investigation, because I've written down 4 different times you've said disrupt, dismantle, destroy.
Yes, sir.
How are you going to extradite drug kingpins from Mexico?
We don't have plans to do that, no, sir.
So once the guns make it to Mexico, there's nothing you were going to do about those drug kingpins.
Yes, sir, there was.
What?
One of the things we wanted to do was, as soon as we had solid information on who the drug kingpin, if you will, was, to share that information with Mexico.
But you didn't share the information with Mexico ahead of time.
Well, sir, we did.
So they're supposed to trust American law enforcement, who's been conducting an investigation and knows firearms are going into Mexico, and you tell them after the fact, and they're supposed to thank you and be partners in this endeavor?
Well, sir, it wasn't only until we had information on who the specific recipient or the drug kingpin was that we felt it was prudent to share that information, because we weren't sure.
How are you going to dismantle Mexican drug cartels if you're not going to extradite the kingpins back to the United States?
Because we hope that the Mexican officials will, in fact, prosecute them for that.
So you're doing this to help the Mexican criminal justice system. You're just not going to tell the Mexican criminal justice system about it.
No, sir, I disagree with that premise.
Well, that's exactly what you just said, Special Agent, that you were going to tell them about it after the fact.
Well, we didn't. We had to know it first. We had to know who the drug. We had to, through this investigation, and as it continues.
Okay, you got the first trace that tells you a U.S. gun is found in Mexico. Why did you not go interview the person who acquired the gun? Why not do the investigation the old-fashioned way, with car stops, with search warrants, with active surveillance? Why do it this way? It was never going to work.
Well, again, years of experience have shown us, sir, that removing one straw purchaser will not have an effect on a larger investigation.
Well, Special Agent, the only way it possibly could have worked would have been if Mexico had extradited these kingpins. If you want to disrupt, dismantle, destroy, the only way it could work is if you told Mexico, or I would have settled for you just telling your own fellow agents about it ahead of time. Because ATF in Mexico didn't know about it, did they?
Well, sir.
Yes or no? Did Mexico ATF office know about this?
They were aware of the investigation, yes, sir.
They were aware that weapons were going into Mexico and you knew about it?
That we knew about it? That, sir, weapons go into Mexico all the time.
From straw purchasers that you knew about? Well, let me ask you this. If Mexico were to ask us to extradite the law enforcement officers who knowingly aided and abetted weapons going into Mexico, what would your reaction to that be?
I would explain to them that our concern in an investigation of this type is to take off the whole organization so we have the greatest impact possible, and not, if you just take off one straw purchaser, you're not having an impact on the greater effort, which is to
Special Agent Newell, my time is up. I'll just say this in conclusion. I worked with ATF for 6 years directly. I worked with ATF indirectly for 10 years. That's just a state DA. This is one of the saddest days in my 6 months in Congress. It may be the saddest day. ATF has a wonderful reputation in South Carolina. We never once contemplated letting